She was an FBI agent, smart, brave, unshakably calm. But a routine traffic stop ended with a bullet in her chest, and the truth unraveled a dark web of racism, abuse of power, and a town's buried secrets. Who really pulled the trigger? And why? This is the story of Elise Monroe, taken too soon but not silenced. Her death sparked a national reckoning, and her legacy changed everything. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that demand to be heard. The autumn wind swept across the quiet streets of Clearview, New Jersey, stirring red and gold leaves as the silver Tesla Model S glided smoothly down Hamilton Avenue. Inside the car, Elise Monroe adjusted the collar of her charcoal gray blazer, her eyes flickering briefly to the rearview mirror. Her face was calm, but her mind replayed every detail of the classified meeting she had just left. A face-to-face with a key informant tied to Operation Iron Web, the FBI's biggest case yet, involving a transnational human trafficking syndicate with ties to local officials. She'd gotten what she needed. Her heart should have been lighter, but the sight of flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror made it drop. She pulled over without protest, her hands steady on the wheel. This wasn't new. As a black woman in her early 30s, driving a luxury car through an upscale white neighborhood, Elise had long since grown accustomed to these routine stops. She took a quiet breath, rolled down her window, and watched as a stocky figure emerged from the patrol car behind her. Officer Bradley Kane, 49, stomped toward her vehicle with the worn swagger of someone clinging to relevance. His uniform fit snugly around a growing midsection, and the corners of his mouth twitched in irritation. He had already decided what kind of person she was before he even saw her face. The Tesla, the tailored blazer, the Cartier watch, it all stung his pride like acid. Years on the force, and he still drove a beat-up Crown Vic. Meanwhile, this woman, this outsider, cruised through his town as if she owned it. License and registration. He barked. Elise responded calmly, professionally. Of course, officer. May I ask why I was stopped? Kane didn't answer right away. His eyes darted across the car's sleek interior, pausing on her Chanel purse. This is a high-risk area. We've had reports of suspicious activity. That's strange, Elise said politely, handing over her documents. I was driving well within the speed limit. Don't get smart with me, he snapped, flipping through her license with feigned scrutiny. Everything was in order. No violations, no excuses. I'm not being smart. I'm just asking. Her voice was composed, with the subtle edge of someone used to playing this game, but unwilling to pretend it was fair. Kane leaned in closer to the window, the smell of stale coffee and sweat clinging to him. You people never learn, do you? He muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for her to hear. Elise's jaw tightened. She'd been trained to de-escalate, to remain calm. But even the best training had limits. I'm going to need you to open your trunk, Kane said. On what grounds? She asked. I have probable cause. May I ask what that cause is? Kane's nostrils flared. You're being difficult. I'm asserting my rights. He stepped back, exasperated, one hand brushing the butt of his Glock. Get out of the car. Elise didn't move. I don't consent to a search without a warrant. You want to play games? Kane snarled. You think that badge on your wrist makes you better than me? She sighed softly, slowly reaching inside her jacket. I need to make a call. The moment her hand disappeared from sight, Kane's eyes widened. His hand went for his gun. Freeze, he screamed. Elise froze. I'm not. But it was too late. The crack of a gunshot shattered the stillness. Elise slumped forward, her head hitting the steering wheel, blood spreading across her silk blouse. Her phone, still tucked in her inner pocket, never had a chance to ring. The first responders arrived within minutes, their sirens slicing through the cool autumn air like a scream too late. Officer Bradley Kane stood near the curb, pale and trembling. The weight of his Glock still fresh in his hand, though he had already holstered it. Blood rushed in his ears, louder than the wailing ambulances and crackling radios. The silver Tesla remained still, its driver motionless, head bowed over the steering wheel as if in silent prayer. Paramedics swarmed, pulling open the door with practiced urgency. She's still warm, one of them muttered, checking for her pulse. But the look in his partner's eyes said what no one wanted to hear. The stretcher came out, CPR began, chest compressions, oxygen mask, a a flurry of motion. But Elise Monroe's chest barely moved. A crimson patch spread wider across her shirt with each second. They loaded her into the ambulance, lights flashing wildly as the doors slammed shut. Within 20 minutes, the announcement came over the hospital radio. Victim pronounced dead on arrival. Massive internal bleeding. Gunshot wound to the upper abdomen. Back at the scene, Clearview Police Detective Naomi Park stood quietly behind the yellow crime scene tape, her arms crossed, a sick feeling curling in her stomach. She had arrived just minutes after the paramedics. She didn't know the full story yet, only what the radio dispatch had said. Officer involved shooting, suspect non-compliant, 1 fatality. But nothing about the scene added up. The Tesla wasn't stolen. The woman hadn't fled. And Kane looked like a man who had realized too late that he'd just destroyed his own life. Naomi walked to the passenger side door where the officers were finishing a search of the car. Her gloved hand lifted the sleek black Chanel purse sitting neatly on the seat. She unzipped it carefully. A wallet, credit cards, ID. And then her breath hitched, a metal badge. FBI. She held it up, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. Get the chief, now. 15 miles away, at the FBI's Newark field office, Supervisory Special Agent Julian Ross was wrapping up an intel debrief when his phone buzzed. When he answered, all it took was one sentence to turn his day upside down. Agent Elise Monroe's been shot in Clearview, killed during a traffic stop. Suspect is a local officer. Ross didn't speak for a moment, just stared ahead, numb. Elise. Brilliant, composed, fierce Elise. She'd only checked in with him hours ago after debriefing an informant for Operation Iron Web. And now she was gone? Just like that? He drove straight to the scene, the FBI SUV tearing across highways under flashing lights. When he arrived, Detective Park briefed him in hushed tones, showing him the badge, the car, and, finally, the shell casing. Ross's hands clenched. Who's the shooter? Officer Bradley Kane. Claims she reached for something. She reached for her badge, Ross said coldly. Or her phone. To call me, she had no weapon. The press descended fast. Within hours, Elise's name, photo, and credentials were all over the evening news. Her Ivy League education, her groundbreaking work on trafficking cases, her community outreach programs, each one now painted with the tragedy of injustice. Crowds gathered outside the Clearview Police Department holding candles and signs that read, Justice for Elise, Black Lives Matter, Stop Police Violence. Kane, still dazed, sat in an interrogation room, his story rehearsed. She moved suddenly, he feared for his life, he acted on instinct. But the cracks were already forming, and Julian Ross? He stood in the morgue hours later, staring through the glass at Elise's still face. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice hoarse. I swear to you, we'll make this right. Julian Ross barely slept. The morning after Elise's death, he was already back on the ground in Clearview, this time with a full FBI team in tow. Operation Iron Web had been suspended temporarily. Nothing else mattered now but the truth. Elise Monroe hadn't just been a fellow agent. She was someone Ross had mentored, believed in, fought for. And now she was a name on a report, a body in a morgue, a headline that threatened to become yet another statistic. He wouldn't allow it. Detective Naomi Park met him outside the precinct, her usual calm eyes shadowed by what she'd seen. There's more, she said quietly, walking him to the evidence room. We pulled the dashcam footage from Kane's cruiser. It's bad, not just what he said, but how he said it. The audio was clear. Kane's voice, sarcastic, aggressive, dripping with entitlement, filled the room. You people always act like you're above the law, the recording echoed. Elise's voice, by contrast, was steady, respectful, calm. Even as Kane shouted, she never raised her tone. Ross's jaw locked. We can work with this. And there's more, Naomi said. A gas station camera across the intersection caught a partial view. It's grainy, but you can see her hand move slowly, deliberately toward her chest. Not a threat, not even close. Ross nodded grimly. We'll enhance it. Quantico can handle that. Elise's phone was retrieved from the Tesla, sealed inside an evidence bag. FBI digital forensics specialists cracked into it within hours. No outgoing messages. No calls. But the screen was still unlocked when it was found, open to her voice recorder app. She'd started recording moments before the shot. The audio was only 12 seconds long. It began with her saying, Okay, calm down. I need to make a call. And then Kane's scream, freeze, followed by the fatal gunshot. Ross played it 3 times. Each time felt like a stab to the ribs. At the same time, another team dug deep into Bradley Kane's life. The deeper they went, the uglier it got. Gambling debts over $35,000. A pending divorce. 3 formal complaints for excessive force, including one filed by a Latina mother whose teenage son was stopped and cuffed for talking back. None of the complaints had led to meaningful discipline. The police union had intervened each time. "This guy was a walking time bomb," Ross muttered, and they kept him on the street. The final blow came 2 days later, in the form of a phone call to the FBI tip line. Lucia Delgado, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s, asked to speak privately with an agent. Naomi and Ross met her in a quiet community center near the park where the shooting took place. Lucia was terrified. She wrung her hands as she explained that she'd seen it all: how Kane shouted, how Elise stayed calm, how her hand moved slowly, not suddenly, before the gun went off. She had hidden behind a bush, too scared to speak out. An immigrant with a green card, she feared retaliation, feared that any misstep might bring trouble to her family. But then she saw Elise's face on the news, heard about who she really was, what she was working on. She was trying to help people, Lucia said through tears. She didn't deserve to die like that. Ross gently took her statement, recording every word. Lucia's account matched everything: the audio, the video, Elise's phone log. It was the last missing piece. By the end of the week, Ross submitted a full report to the U.S. Attorney's Office with the recommendation that federal charges be filed. "This wasn't a tragic misunderstanding," he wrote. "It was a calculated abuse of power, laced with prejudice, driven by desperation." Justice had begun to move, but only just. The fight ahead would be fierce, and Ross knew it. But with the truth on their side, they had something else too: momentum. Federal charges came swiftly. Within days of receiving the FBI's comprehensive report, U.S. Attorney Elena Ramirez announced that Officer Bradley Kane would be indicted on 4 counts: second-degree murder, deprivation of civil rights under color of law resulting in death, use of a firearm in the commission of a violent crime, and obstruction of justice. The announcement sent shockwaves through Clearview, drawing national attention and dividing the small town in ways it had never experienced before. Some rallied behind Kane, convinced he was just a cop doing his job under pressure. Others, louder and growing in number, demanded justice for Elise Monroe. The courthouse in Newark became the stage for a 6-week trial that captivated the entire nation. Every morning, people lined up around the block hoping to secure a seat in the courtroom. Civil rights leaders, politicians, FBI agents, police union representatives, and grieving citizens all shared the same pews. Media vans cluttered the streets. Protesters held signs outside: "Justice for Elise, protect Black women, end qualified immunity." The prosecution, led by seasoned Assistant U.S. Attorney James Carter, was methodical, calm, and devastatingly precise. He opened by humanizing Elise, a brilliant FBI agent, daughter of a retired schoolteacher, a woman who rose through the ranks with integrity, who died not on a battlefield but on a suburban street for simply asserting her rights. Then came the evidence. The dashcam audio played in court made jaws tighten and eyes water. Kane's words, laced with sarcasm and thinly veiled racism, were impossible to defend. Elise's responses were composed, polite, firm. The jury heard the fatal moment: the scream, the gunshot, the silence. Carter called in FBI imaging specialists who demonstrated how Elise's movement was slow, deliberate, and clearly non-threatening. They highlighted the body language of Kane, the absence of any physical threat, and the rapid escalation without reason. The grainy gas station footage, once enhanced, showed the deadly sequence with chilling clarity. Then came Lucia Delgado. She entered the courtroom visibly nervous but determined. The defense tried to rattle her, questioning her eyesight, her memory, her motives, but Lucia didn't waver. She recounted exactly what she saw: a calm woman, a raging officer, a single movement toward the chest, and a gunshot without cause. Her voice trembled only once, when she said, "I saw her die for nothing." Supervisory Agent Julian Ross took the stand next. Dressed in a dark suit, his voice was even, but his eyes betrayed the loss he carried. He spoke about Elise's training, her dedication to the iron web case, and the burden of sending her out that day. "She was trying to protect lives," he said, "and she lost hers to someone who swore to do the same." The defense, led by high-profile attorney Philip Granger, tried desperately to sow doubt. They argued that Kane had seconds to act in a high-stress situation, that officers were trained to respond to perceived threats, and that the footage was unclear. They pointed to Kane's years of service, his awards, the dangers of law enforcement. But the jury wasn't swayed. When closing arguments concluded, the 12 jurors, diverse in race, gender, and age, deliberated for 3 days in complete isolation. On the fourth morning, the courtroom was packed to the walls as the foreperson rose. One by one, the verdicts came: guilty, 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 guilty. A gasp rippled through the room. Elise's mother wept quietly, her husband holding her hand. Ross closed his eyes. Kane sat frozen, pale, and visibly shaking. The wheels of justice had turned, slowly, painfully, but they had turned. And in that moment, a quiet, powerful truth took root in the hearts of those watching. This time, the system didn't look away. 1 month later, beneath a clear blue sky in June, the federal courthouse in Newark was once again packed. Every seat was filled, every hallway buzzing with reporters, activists, and families watching history unfold. At precisely 10 a.m., Judge Miriam Goldstein entered the courtroom and took her seat. A petite woman with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through noise like steel, she was known for her fairness and her fire. Before delivering the sentence, she spoke for nearly 20 minutes, her words broadcast live to a nation still grappling with the fallout of Elise Monroe's death. This court acknowledges that Officer Bradley Kane failed in the most sacred duty of his badge, to protect life. He acted not out of fear, but out of entitlement, resentment, and deep-seated prejudice. His actions have left a family shattered, a community divided, and an entire nation forced to reckon once more with the reality of unequal justice. Then came the sentence. Life in federal prison without the possibility of parole for second-degree murder. 20 years for civil rights violations resulting in death. 10 years for using a firearm during a violent crime, to run consecutively. 5 years for obstruction of justice, to run concurrently. The final ruling: life plus 10 years. No parole, no early release, no redemption on paper. Kane stared forward, face blank, but his hands trembled. Behind him, his former wife Brenda sat stone-faced, filing for divorce within the week. His adult children, once proud of their father's badge, had cut ties. The man who once walked with a swagger through Clearview now faced a future of steel bars and silent shame. In addition, the court granted civil restitution to Elise Monroe's family. Kane was ordered to pay $1 million in damages for pain, suffering, and irreparable loss. The funds were to come from his remaining assets, including a frozen pension. It was a symbolic gesture. Money couldn't bring Elise back, but it was a recognition, a record that could not be erased. Yet as Kane faded from public memory, Elise's name only grew. Her story became a catalyst. Under the weight of public outcry and federal oversight, the Clearview Police Department underwent a massive overhaul. A new chief was appointed. Policies were rewritten. Body cameras were made mandatory for every officer on every shift. De-escalation training, racial sensitivity education, and independent civilian oversight were all implemented within a year. Officers who had once brushed aside complaints now operated under a microscope. But perhaps the most profound change began with her name. The Elise Monroe Foundation was launched just weeks after the trial. Spearheaded by Supervisory Agent Julian Ross and Elise's family, the foundation offered legal support to victims of police violence and annual scholarships to young women of color pursuing careers in law, justice, and public service. Its mission: to build a future where no one would have to die to be heard. Operation Iron Web, the case Elise had dedicated her final months to, was revived under Ross's leadership. With the clues she had gathered, names, locations, coded transactions, the team executed multiple raids across state lines. A sprawling human trafficking network was exposed, dozens of victims were rescued, and several high-ranking officials with ties to the operation were arrested. When the final report was published, Elise was listed on the cover as lead agent of record. Her face now hangs in the Hall of Honor at Quantico and on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., etched in marble, alongside those who gave everything. And in Clearview, on the corner of Hamilton Avenue and Bellflower Street, a plaque was mounted on a tall black pole, in memory of Special Agent Elise Monroe. She stood for justice, even when justice stood against her. Julian Ross visits the corner once a year, always on June 14th. He places white lilies beneath the sign, stands in silence for a while, then walks away with purpose. Because Elise Monroe is no longer just a name, she is a movement. The story of Special Agent Elise Monroe is not just about a tragedy, it's about the deep flaws in systems meant to protect, the courage it takes to stand up for what's right, and the enduring power of truth. Elise followed the law, upheld her oath, and remained calm even in the face of injustice. Yet her life was taken because someone saw her not for who she was, but through the lens of bias, fear, and power. This story reminds us that justice isn't automatic. It requires persistence, accountability, and people who refuse to stay silent. It shows that prejudice can wear a uniform, carry a badge, and still act unlawfully. But it also shows that one voice, one recording, one witness brave enough to speak up can change the course of everything. The legacy Elise left behind, through her case, the reforms she inspired, and the foundation in her name, teaches us that the fight for justice doesn't end in a courtroom. It continues in policies, in communities, in how we treat each other every single day. Her sacrifice shines as a beacon for those who are silenced, ignored, or wronged. So let us carry her story forward, not in sorrow, but in purpose. Let it ignite conversations, inspire change, and demand better. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that truly matters.